Have you ever stopped to think about that spoonful of sugar you add to your morning coffee? Or the sweetness in your favorite dessert? Where does it actually come from? It seems so simple, just a tiny white crystal, but the journey from plant to your kitchen is a fascinating and surprisingly complex process. Today, we're going to dive deep into the sweet world of sugar production. Get ready, because it's a story of giant plants, incredible machinery, and some pretty cool science. So, let's start at the very beginning. Most of the sugar we consume comes from two main sources, sugarcane and sugar beets. They look totally different, but they both have one magical thing in common. They're incredibly good at storing sucrose, which is the scientific name for the sugar we know and love. About 80% of the world's sugar comes from sugarcane, a tall, thick grass that grows in tropical climates. The other 20% comes from sugar beets, which look a bit like a large, pale turnip and thrive in more temperate regions. Let's follow the journey of sugarcane first. Imagine vast fields of these towering green stalks, sometimes growing up to 20 feet tall. When they're ready, it's harvest time. This can be done by hand with machetes, which is incredibly labor-intensive, or more commonly these days, by massive mechanical harvesters. These machines are like giant lawnmowers for sugarcane, cutting the stalks at the base and chopping them into smaller, more manageable pieces. Time is of the essence here. Once the cane is cut, the sugar content starts to decrease, so it needs to get to the processing mill as quickly as possible, usually within 24 hours. Once at the mill, the real magic begins. The first step is to get the sweet juice out of the cane. The chopped stalks are fed into a series of massive, powerful rollers that crush and squeeze them with immense pressure. It's like a giant juicer. Hot water is often sprayed over the cane between pressings to help dissolve and extract as much sugar as possible. What you're left with are two things: a sugary, greenish-brown liquid called raw juice, and a dry, fibrous material called bagasse. This bagasse isn't waste, though. It's an amazing byproduct that's often used as fuel to power the entire sugar mill, making the process very energy efficient. Now, that raw juice is sweet, but it's also full of impurities like dirt, plant fibers, and other organic stuff we don't want in our sugar bowl. So, the next step is clarification. This is where we clean up the juice. The most common method involves adding lime and heat. The lime, which is calcium hydroxide, reacts with the impurities, causing them to clump together and settle at the bottom of large tanks, or float to the top as a scum that can be skimmed off. What we're left with is a much clearer, lighter-colored juice. But this juice is still mostly water. To get to the sugar crystals, we need to get rid of that water. This is done through evaporation. The clarified juice is pumped into a series of huge multi-story evaporators. By heating the juice under a vacuum, the boiling point is lowered, which saves energy and prevents the sugar from caramelizing or burning. As the juice moves through the series of evaporators, more and more water boils off, leaving behind a thick, golden brown syrup. We're getting closer. This syrup is then moved into a special vessel called a vacuum pan for the crystallization stage. This is probably the most critical and skillful part of the whole process. The syrup is boiled one last time under a vacuum to concentrate it even further until it becomes supersaturated. This means it contains more sugar than the liquid can normally hold. At this precise moment, tiny seed crystals of sugar are added. This gives the dissolved sugar molecules something to latch onto, and they begin to grow, forming the larger crystals we recognize. It is a delicate balancing act of temperature and pressure to grow the crystals to just the right size. The result is a thick, gloopy mixture of sugar crystals and remaining syrup, known as masaquit. Think of it like wet sand. Now, we need to separate the crystals from the liquid. This is done in a centrifuge, which is essentially a giant, fast-spinning drum with a screen inside. The masaquit is poured in, and as it spins at incredibly high speeds, the liquid syrup, now called molasses, is flung out through the screen, while the sugar crystals are left behind. And there you have it. Raw sugar. This stuff is about 97 to 99% pure sucrose. It's got a brownish color and a thin film of molasses still coating the crystals, which gives it a distinct flavor. This raw sugar is then shipped off to refineries around the world for the final purification steps. Now, what about sugar beets? The process is similar in principle, but different in practice. Instead of crushing, the beets are washed and sliced into thin strips called cassettes. These look a bit like crinkle-cut fries. These cassettes are then sent into a large tank called a diffuser, where they are mixed with hot water. The water flows in the opposite direction of the beets, and through diffusion, the sugar is drawn out of the beet sills and into the water, creating a dark, sugary juice. The leftover beet pulp is pressed to remove excess water and is often used as nutritious animal feed. From here, the beet sugar juice goes through a very similar process to the cane juice. It's purified, filtered, concentrated through evaporation, and then crystallized in vacuum pans. One key difference is that sugar from beets can be processed into refined white sugar directly at the initial factory without needing a separate refinery. The raw juice is cleaner to begin with, so the process is a bit more streamlined. So, let's talk about that final step, refining. Whether it comes from cane or beets, if you want that pure white table sugar, the raw sugar needs to be refined. At the refinery, the raw sugar crystals are first washed with a syrup to remove that outer layer of molasses. The crystals are then dissolved in hot water to form a new sugar liquor. This liquor goes through further purification. One method uses a process called carbonatation, where carbon dioxide gas and lime are bubbled through the liquor to precipitate out impurities. Another method involves filtering it through activated carbon or an ion exchange resin, which are excellent at trapping any remaining color and non-sugar components. After this intense filtering, we're left with a pure, colorless sugar syrup. This syrup is then recrystallized, just like before, in a vacuum pan. It has spun in a centrifuge one last time to separate the pure white crystals from any remaining syrup. The crystals are then dried in a large rotating drum with hot air, a bit like a giant clothes dryer. This prevents them from clumping together. Finally, the sugar is screened to separate it into different grain sizes for various uses, like fine granulated sugar for baking, or larger crystals for decorating. And then, it's packaged and sent to a store near you. It's pretty amazing, right? From a towering blade of grass or a lumpy root vegetable, through a complex series of crushing, boiling, purifying, and crystallizing, we get this simple, sweet ingredient that's a part of our daily lives. The next time you're sweetening your tea or baking a cake, you'll know the incredible industrial and scientific journey those little crystals took to get to your table. Thanks for watching this sweet exploration into the world of sugar. If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into how things are made, and maybe share this with a friend who has a sweet tooth. See you in the next video.